This is the new Tri-Brit from EPZ, and I think they just released a value monster because this might be the next neutral benchmark at $200. The main difference versus the MEGA5 is that the vocals on the P50 pops out a bit more. It makes the sound less neutral. It brings more emotionality to the music, especially to the singers. It's not going to be as smooth as the MEGA5. The ESTs are still going to be better in terms of the overall timbre, the air. The MEGA5 still does that better, but similar like the Moondrop Meteor, you don't get that sizzliness or planarness in the treble, and it just sounds like a regular BA. So what you end up getting is a more vocal-centric MEGA5EST7 for less than half the price, and it overall makes it more enjoyable to me because it's just less vanilla sounding, and the vocals are now more extended and more clear, more powerful than the MEGA5EST. I just don't see myself paying $500 plus for like a neutral vanilla sound. But since this is 200, this is a whole different story. Now versus the Moondrop Meteors, like I mentioned in my Meteor review, it fixes the downsides of the Meteors. The vocals are less shouty because it's fuller, there's more low end, there's less gain in the 1 to 3K region, and there's also a little bit more air to the treble. I will say the Meteor is a bit smoother when it comes to the treble. It's not going to be as like boosted when it comes to like the detail and the volume just in general, but again the P50 does all this for less than half the price. But one downside is that all of them have weaker bass. They're not going to be the most engaging and rumbly when it comes to the low end presentation. The low end on the P50s are also around the same as the earlier MEGA5s that I have heard. Now the newer ones do have a little bit more bass, but I'm going off of the one that I've heard, which is a earlier unit. The DDs in them do the job, there's nothing wrong, they don't do anything more. So don't expect like an authoritative slam, a heavy impact, or that like deep shaking subwoofer type feeling. It just does the job in the low end. And in terms of overall smoothness and just refinement in general, the MEGA5 is still going to be the smoothest, the most like natural in terms of the timbre. It has the ESTs, and then after that would probably be the Meteor, with the P50s being very close behind. For example, if you compare the P50s to the Brain Damage and the Wu Zetian Legend, it's not as sizzly, artificial, and thin as the Brain Damage. It doesn't like give me that like feeling to the treble, right? And then the timbre is also not peaky and sharp like the Legend, which is like overly bright. It's still solid, but just don't expect EST levels of smoothness when it comes to the P50s. But I will say the P50s are smoother and fuller sounding than the SuperMix4. It feels more natural. It doesn't feel as detailed as the SuperMix4 because it does have a little bit more like boost when it comes to the upper mids and the treble, but the overall like tonality feels more, I guess, natural and more quote unquote musical on the P50s. This is because the SM4 just sounds more dynamic, it's more energetic when it comes to the sound, especially when it comes to the treble, whereas the P50 is, you know, it's more chill, it's more neutral, it's more clean. Like the SuperMix4, these are also a pretty good all-rounder, and both of them are also mid-volume sets. I like the P50s more when it comes to the ballads, indie stuff, especially when it comes to male artists, because the vocal timbre just feels fuller, it feels more correct, whereas the SuperMix4 is more like of an all-rounder type of vocal presentation, and it works great for almost every genre, and it's a little bit more like dynamic and a little more energetic when it comes to the treble. Now versus other $200 sets like the Odysseys, these two are pretty different when it comes to their use cases. The Odysseys have better sub-bass texture with a little more detail when it comes to the treble, and the vocals are more relaxed, which allows it for better scaling and just more immersion and slightly better layering, I would say. The overall presentation feels more laid out in front of you on the Odysseys, whereas when it comes to the P50s, these are for more mid-volume listening and they focus more on the vocals. Artists pop out more when it comes to the mix, the vocals are clearer, and it still maintains that clean and neutral sound without it being too vanilla, kind of like the MEGA5, and clinical like the Moondrop Meteors. Tech-wise, both the P50 and Odysseys are around the same. It trades blows depending on the frequencies. For example, the Odysseys have better bass texture, has a little bit more micro details when it comes to the treble, whereas the P50 has just more vocal clarity and a little bit more air when it comes to the higher frequencies. So both are great, and it just ends up being, do you listen at mid volume or at high volume, and do you like your vocals to be, you know, more forward or less forward, and depending on that you would either go with the P50s or the Odysseys. On the other hand, the Volume S is actually more similar to the P50s in that they are both vocal focus set following that clean and balanced presentation. The main difference is that the P50 just sounds better for vocals when it comes to mid volume because it has more gain in that volume range. It works better just when it comes to like mid volume listening, whereas the Volume S, you need to really crank them more to really get the full effect, the full immersion. So basically, if you listen loud like me, then the Volume S in the stock configuration will still be better for vocals, but but if you listen at mid-volume, then the P50s would be the better pick, and that's pretty much all it comes down to. Now, versus the Cadenza 4, the Cat 4 feels smoother, it's airier, but it's not as full and balanced when it comes to the low end and when it comes to male vocals. Both are mid-volume sets with similar, vocal presentation when it comes to the distance of how forward the vocals are. And it really just comes down to, are you looking for something brighter leaning with a lighter no way, like something that's airier? If yes, that would be the Cadenza 4. Whereas if you want something more balanced and neutral sounding overall, the P50s feel more correct and grounded because of the extra low end. Tech-wise, they're also around the same, maybe a slight edge to the Cadenza 4. But overall, it just comes down to, do you like fuller vocals? If yes, get the P50s, they're better for male artists. Or if you like airier vocals, like sweeter vocals, then you would go for the Cadenza 4, which are better for female singers. Then lastly, if you want something bassier with better low end texture and impact, you still got the High 4s, the T-Pros, the Strellas. They're not going to be as vocal centric and balanced. They're not very neutral set, they're like bass boosted. But if you're craving more bass, but not quite bass head levels of like impact, then those will be better. They're still relatively balanced compared to how much bass they have. But yeah, that's it for now. And overall, the packaging is also pretty solid as well. I would say it's relatively on the same level as the Meteor. Maybe the design is slightly better on the Meteor, but the case is actually like hard leather. It's actually better than the Meteors. So overall, accessory wise, you're not missing out, like if at all, when it comes to the P50s. Now, they're not the most unique sound wise. If you want scaling, the Odysseys, Volume S, still better. If you want like a different coloration to the sound, you got other IEMs as well. But if you want a neutral benchmark, these are a solid option. But yeah, I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Rorix Cat, Dom Q, Discal Scotus, B Urac, Mystic Spoon Attack, Walker Standard, User, Patrick, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, Anton Risto, Gis Sang Young, Ed Dunlap, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Ben Thompson, Obi, Triple Well Extended, Wizard, Frickalicious, Andrick, Ricardo, Tapas R, Chucko Norris, Oh Really, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Shren Buck Lee, Nico, Igris, and Forever New. Thank you guys so much for the year.